Welcome to the Diregentleman Channel. My name is Gus Zagarella, and I'm here with Addison Peacock.
Hi, I'm Addison Peacock from the thing that Gus just said, and welcome to the Diregentleman Channel.
Yes, we're going to be talking about the movie Barbarian today.
Hell yeah, buddy. I watched this very recently when it went to HBO Max. I meant to see it in theaters. I would have really liked to see it in theaters, honestly, but that's okay. I watched it on HBO Max in my living room with all the lights off while my roommate was at her boyfriend's house, and it was very scary.
This is a really scary movie because there are just so many moments where you're like absolutely not sure what the threat is, but you feel
Threatened.
Very threatened.
Also, I said a really unhinged thing that made Henry go, oh, that made me think maybe this is an extremely hot take. But this movie's treatment of Bill Skarsgard, to me, I have not seen something quite like it since the way Janet Leigh is treated in Psycho. Which is to say, the movie tricks us into thinking he will be a protagonist / perhaps the antagonist. And then he just fucking dies.
Yeah, I gotta hand it to Bill Skarsgård. This is kind of like an unforgettable performance.
I love him.
His character at the beginning, Keith, is simultaneously like the sweetest, like most genuine dude, but also the most suspicious, like off-putting, like weirdo that you would end up in this situation with.
Keith is a guy that here's the way I would describe Keith as a character is he is a rom-com protagonist who has been put in a horror film and does not know he is in one because he just acts like a nice kind of sweet, weird, quirky, nice man. But, like, because of the surrounding circumstances, he comes across as very threatening.
And that's the fascinating part, because we're getting this from the perspective of Tess, our protagonist, who has booked bed and what are they called?
An Airbnb.
An Airbnb.
Which are already, by the way, kind of threatening. But
yes, and it's even more threatening when you show up and Bill Skarsgård is already there.
I'm gonna be real with you guys. If I got to my Airbnb and Bill Skarsgård was there, I'd be so excited.
That's fair. If
Bill Skarsgård, the actor, was waiting in my Airbnb and was like, oh, I guess we booked the same Airbnb. Because here's the thing. If you remove the, like, terrifying elements of this story, it is like a romance fanfic premise. Like, oh no, there's only one bed. Guess me and handsome stranger have to share a room.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, I guess we'll have to cohabitate. And then, like, initially be, like, wary of each other and then, like, bond over genuine similarities we have throughout the evening.
Exactly.
If this wasn't marketed as a horror film, the, like, first act of this could really be, like, the beginning to a, like, romantic sitcom of like, oh, well, will they see each other again after, like, she does the job interview and after, like, they have to leave this place together? Like, will they, like, follow up with each other? Like, there's a lot there.
The first act of this movie is a spiritual companion to Fresh to me because, like Fresh, it's if you just watch the first act of the movie, then turn it off, you're like, a romantic comedy. Except in this one, Bill Skarsgård really did nothing wrong. He's just a guy.
It's the best. I love how they keep, like, building up, these different things where it's like basically every time Tess goes into a different room, she, like, locks the door, and, like, late at night her door gets unlocked by some strange means and he's having, like, some kind of night terror on the couch. So you're like, is this a haunting? Is he possessed? Is he gonna werewolf? Like, what's going on here?
Oh yeah. I fully had a thing, because I don't know how I managed to avoid Barbarian spoilers, but I did. I avoided all the spoilers. Being on horror Twitter, I avoided the spoilers, because most of the people I follow were just like, I liked this movie, or I didn't like this movie, and they didn't say why, because they were nice people and didn't want to ruin it for everybody else. So I started the movie, and I really did have a moment where I was like, is this gonna be another Fresh? I loved Fresh, but, like, I don't want to watch it again in a different movie. I was like, if Bill Skarsgård's just an evil guy, I don't care. Because
that was what was, like, interesting and novel about Fresh. And if you see another movie exactly like it, like, right after, you're gonna be like, ooh, you're gonna have to compare the two, and it's not fair to either movie.
And also just Tess being a character that I could really relate to. She did all of the things that, like, I, as, like, a single woman in this situation would do. She's, like, so careful. She takes a picture of his ID, so she has that on her phone. She locks every door. She goes through the medicine cabinet, like, looks, just anything she can do to be like, is this a safe person? Will I be okay? I was, coming at it from her perspective in more ways than one. I was so suspicious of him. And then when he died, I felt really bad for being so suspicious of him.
Because that's the thing. Like, it lures you in and makes you really unsettled through this whole first act, wondering what's going on with this house. And then a dungeon happens. There is a dungeon beneath the house. And I did not, I couldn't fathom how, freaked out I was the second they showed that first room with
the snuff room.
Yeah, the snuff room with the camera and the bed. And I'm like, okay. So Bill Skarsgard, Keith, is, he's doing Tickled down here in the basement.
I was like, he's a serial killer. He's making snuff films. Or I really thought, he's like an artist. He's like part of this artist collective. I was like, this is his art.
Yeah. And then Tess backs into a different doorway, which reveals a medieval fucking mine shaft into who knows where.
The secondary dungeon.
Yes, the secondary dungeon with the even scarier cages and truly, truly horrific things down there.
Oh, it's so scary. I am so, have you ever seen the movie, this is gonna be, I just bumped my table so hard I got excited.
Oh, no.
But have you ever seen, and I know this is probably a no, but have you seen The Descent?
The Descent, is that one of the ones where they, go underground and there's, cryptids running around trying to get them?
Essentially, yes. It's a movie about a bunch of women going on a caving expedition, and there are creatures in there, but they get, stuck. There's cave-ins. I'm very claustrophobic. Movies like that scare the shit out of me. And when Tess was creeping through the, little passages in the downstairs, oh, absolutely not.
Yeah, because, at that moment in the movie, you really legitimately have no idea what the rest of the film is going to be. Especially when Keith arrives back, and he's in this is actually, a very reasonable thing when, you look at it not being suspicious of Keith, when he's I haven't seen anything that's going down. I can't just leave here. I gotta, actually look for myself.
Because, again, she is also a stranger to him.
Exactly. And so he's being reasonable by wanting to see the dungeon for himself, and she's being reasonable by not wanting to go down there with him because it might be his dungeon.
Yes!
So when he goes down there and he's, deep in the tunnels and calling for help, you're like... No. What is this movie? What are you, Barbarian? Explain yourself.
I will say, I now know exactly why. A friend of mine who is a film critic that I really enjoy, she tweeted after watching this movie, she was like, I don't care who he is, I am not going into a scary basement for any white man.
And on some level, legit, because, going into that dungeon, even when, Keith is screaming and crying for help, is, there's just no way.
I'm gonna be real, I don't know. I might just be I'm really sorry, Keith, good luck. I gotta go. But, on the other hand, when he was teaching her how to fold the duvet, it was so cute.
That was an adorable scene. See, that's the thing. The first half of this movie is adorable. And because this first portion ends with, the tragic death of Keith, it hits that much harder.
Yeah, I was watching this movie alone in my apartment with all the lights off, because that's the best way to watch a horror movie at home if you're going to be not in the theater and you want the, experience. And... I screamed because it's so unceremonious. Of course I saw the, motion in the background and I was like, oh, here comes something scary. What I did not expect was then the something scary to take Keith's head and just bash it into a bloody pulp on the wall.
Yeah!
I was like, oh no! He's dead.
I love how, it's simultaneously oh yeah, Keith really is a trustworthy good guy. Oh no, Keith! No, he was the best of us! He's gone forever!
Literally, I'm like, no, he was an artist who loves jazz documentaries and knows how to fold a duvet.
He was so young! We hardly knew ye!
He was so handsome. He was nice enough to wait till she got out of the bathroom to open the wine so she could see him open the wine and know it was safe to drink. That was the first move where I was like, he's either a Steve from Fresh level manipulator or he's just a nice man.
And I guess with kindness is so difficult to know for sure.
That's the heartbreaking thing is day after they had their like nice like night staying up and talking, and he left her that little note, and she was like smiling to herself, and I was like, oh, this is nice. They're gonna be. I genuinely, for a brief period, I did decide to trust Keith, and I was like, okay, so now they're gonna go through this harrowing thing together, and maybe he'll die during it, or maybe they'll both survive, and they'll like run away together at the end, and they'll be bonded by this horrible trauma forever. No, R.I.P. Keith, rip in peace.
So after the death of Keith, and after the something scary like gets him, and
we enter the third movie inside of this movie.
This is like sort of almost like an anthology story in its structure, but it's around the same house.
It's one of those things where it's such a choice. I understand folks I know who watched this movie and genuinely were like, I hated that it did that. And I'm like, that's totally fair. It's really disorienting.
This should never be anybody's first horror movie, is the thing.
It's also just in general, like, an example of a film very deliberately, like, breaking storytelling rules. They're like, absolutely not. Changing protagonists midway through. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, because that's the thing. But here's the thing. I think that was a good plan, because if we started the movie with AJ,
I would have turned it off.
Yeah, it would be a deeply, like, uncompelling, painful...
I would have turned the movie off.
Yeah.
There is a film that I am not going to name because I don't want to be a dick. But, you know, process of elimination, people can look up his filmography and figure out what movie I'm talking about. But there is a Justin Long film that came out fairly recently. Or actually may not even be out yet. I might be talking out of, like, having seen it when I'm early. But regardless, there's a Justin Long horror film that is similarly Justin Long playing a shitty guy who is in a scary situation. And it is just a much worse version, and it's because we start with him, and far too many good things happen to him before the bad stuff happens to him. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to watch this guy have a good time before he eventually maybe dies.
Exactly. And that's the thing. We needed the stuff before with Keith.
When we leave things off, Tess is still alive.
Yeah. As far as we know, like, her fate is ambiguous. Like, the scary may or may not have gotten her, but she's there in Barbary. We really don't even know, like, what the time frame is until later for, like, you know, where AJ's going, where he's singing his little, like, you know, Ricky Tikki Tavi song, going down the road, and you're like, who is this guy?
I just genuinely, I actually, just giving you all a peek into my watching movies alone at home experience, I was just sitting there, I was watching, and I out loud went, Justin Long!
Yeah, because it's the most surreal thing to go from, like, monster attack in a dungeon to Justin Long on a beach road singing along to the radio.
Driving in his convertible, and I was like, first of all, my first question was, is this Justin Long playing a character, or is this Justin Long playing himself? And then I figured out very quickly that he was playing a character. But at just first appearance, I was just like, we're clearly in Los Angeles. He's in a sports car. Is this just Justin Long? No. He's the worst man in the world.
I think it's a contrast between how much of kind of like a shitty, gutless coward that AJ is. It's the contrast between that and the fact that these are the most brightly lit, unambiguously colorful scenes in the movie.
Oh, AJ, my enemy.
Oh, he sucks.
He sucks so fucking bad. And you're correct that if we didn't have the Tess and Keith stuff at the beginning, I'm like, I would have turned the movie off. I would have been like, fuck this guy. I don't want to see him for an hour.
Yeah, and I think that, like, basically this little, like, AJ cul-de-sac we're in until he decides to go to the house.
Cul-de-sac.
He's getting, like, you know, bankrupted, rightfully so, over the fact that he, you know, sexually assaulted an actress on the set of his pilot.
Yeah, co-star in his pilot has come forward with allegations of sexual assault, and he has been dropped from the pilot. Ha 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 ha, get wrecked.
Yeah.
And he spends so much of it, and I wanted to trust in the movie because a lot of people I really liked this movie, so I was very nervous for a second because as much as I love the genre, horror has a very mixed track record in the way it handles sexual violence. There are a lot of horror films that I have gotten some beautiful catharsis out of, and I think have explored the issue really, really well, Fresh being one of them to me. But there are also a lot of films that I'm like, oh, I wish they didn't try to tackle this. So I had a brief moment where I was like, if there's gonna be some weird reveal that he, like, didn't do it, I'm gonna, like, and, like, this is, like, a false allegations ruined his life thing, I'm gonna be very angry. But then he goes back to his hometown and talks to a man in a bar and is like, you know how sometimes women say no, but they don't really mean it. I'm like, oh no.
Because you just see him completely like, he doesn't know we're listening in. That's how the scene felt.
And also, it was such a genuinely like on the nose, but also really like nice to see. Nice to see is a weird way to put it, but like satisfying to see thing because like not to whatever. This is a dark film. We're gonna go to some dark places. I know more than one person who has like had to sit with the fact that the person who assaulted them probably doesn't even fully understand that what they did was assault. Like they don't fully get, because they don't think of you like a person. They don't understand your agency. They don't whatever internalized bullshit. They have justified, like, for a fact that like so many people who have done this kind of harm don't see themselves as just someone who's in a misunderstanding. They earnestly think they have somehow twisted around and justified to themselves. They're like, well, no, I'm not like a bad guy, so I wouldn't do a bad thing.
And as the film goes on, we see like basically him confronted with the fact that like, oh, well, there are much worse monsters out there, so that means that he's innocent in his own eyes. But the movie never lets him off the hook for it, and that's what I really like about it.
Well, his whole storyline essentially is a guy who thinks that because he's not cognizant of the harm that he's doing, or because he's able to justify the harm to himself, that he can't possibly be a bad person. And it's fascinating. Like, he is so good at justifying the harm to himself, and we'll go through it more linearly, but you know exactly what else I'm talking about. This movie is a really great look at kind of the like most evil, like the furthest reaches of human cruelty, but it also is a really good look at like the banality of evil. Because like, this isn't gonna maybe come as a huge surprise. I am a woman in the world, and the statistics are not kind. Like, I have known abusive men who behave exactly like that. They tromp through their lives and they hurt people, and then the second that the hurt is brought to their attention, then they have like a little crying meltdown, and they're like, I didn't mean to do that. And it's like, okay, well, you did.
I like really think that this movie is set up in such a fascinating way in order to deliver us a character like AJ, who is just as like, who thinks he's as complex as these people often do, but is as like simple and cowardly and consistent in his simple cowardice. And the rest of the film creates the perfect environment where not only does he not get let off the hook, we understand that, like, yeah, it's a big world, lots of things are complex, maybe there's, like, even more abject cruelty in the world, but that doesn't make this okay, and if you don't learn or get better, then, yeah, you end up being AJ, the guy.
You end up being AJ, the worst man. And I know that there is literally a worse man in this film, but to me, AJ is worse because he's real. Not that there aren't people in the world like the guy we'll get to, but there are so many more AJs. Do you know what I mean?
The existence of guys like him, I think so many people in the world, especially like men, are like, well, if there's like a rapist serial killer who's like, got like hundreds and hundreds of victims, and I'm not that guy, that means that I am good.
Well, it's also how you get people doing the like, playing the whole like, well, I never hit this person, but I like did all this emotional terrorism to them, so therefore I didn't do anything wrong. Like, it's just, people are always, there's always going to be somebody who did more harm than you, but that doesn't erase the harm you did anyway.
Yeah, and this extends beyond, like, just the realm of sexual assault. Obviously,
yeah.
Barbarian is commenting on that, but, like, stuff like, well, I'm not a KKK member, so I can't be racist.
Yeah. I was gonna say, AJ does a lot of different things that are kind of materially harmful. The fact that he, bought up property in a neighborhood that was left to rot and, like, uses it as an Airbnb. Like, there's so much.
That's a great bit of like AJ character trait. The fact that he's also a shitty landlord.
Yeah, he's also a shitty
amazing.
landlord, like who like bought up property in a part of Michigan that had been left to rot, like in an area outside, or a part of Detroit that had been left to rot. Like, just so much of it. The way he talks to his fucking mom, like, all of it. I'm just like,
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, when we get all of this information about AJ, we are so ready for him to go down into that dungeon and get got. Like,
I
we're
know,
prepared
it
for it
is-
to happen either way. We're like, oh, he doesn't know. He doesn't know. He's gonna get got by the dungeon creature. And it's weird because we're anticipating it and we're almost like excited now because we've already felt bad about the dungeon, but now we're in on it.
I got bloodthirsty. I also will say this movie did some fun tonal whiplash things, and it did make me laugh out loud multiple times when AJ was getting ready to go into the dungeon. When he sits down and Googles, like, can you list secret basement as square
Yes,
footage?
yeah!
I screamed.
I'm like, you asshole. Like,
You piece of shit.
oh my God.
You fucking dick.
It's so
And he
fucking
sees-
funny. Just gleefully measuring the hallways of the dungeon and being like, haha, yeah, this is all my property.
Measuring the smut room and being like, or the smut room, measuring the snuff room, also maybe a smut room, and being like, 9 square feet. Like, this fucker.
Yeah. Just seeing like a terrible, like, pit down into the mines of Moria. And he's like, oh, fuck yeah. I'm gonna get so much money when I charge people for this property.
The glee on his face when he sees the, like, shadowy depths below and the rickety wooden staircase. I won't keep quoting tweets, but the other tweet that I saw about this movie was someone was like, it's the first horror movie I've ever watched where I've been rooting for the person to go further into the scary place. You're like, yes, AJ, go into the basement. Go down there, see what's there.
It's brilliant. And essentially, like, the monster reveal of this movie is done in 2 different parts. Another one that's, like, in a separate timeline. And then the current, like, everything that could have gone wrong with what happened down there has gone wrong.
Yeah, the movie exists on 3 timelines that eventually converge, basically. We get Tess and Keith, we get AJ in LA, and then we get the flashbacks in the past to a man named Frank living in this neighborhood just before everyone starts to clear out of it and it gets left behind. And he is up to some not good things.
Yeah, and what I love about this sequence is that it has this very, like, oh, the 1950s, it's so wholesome, and he's
So
just going to the
idyllic.
store to get, diapers and, like, all this stuff to take care of, like, his child. But he's not married. He doesn't even have a clear spouse. He lives alone, supposedly. And also, like, suburban entropy is creeping in as white flight is beginning to occur. And it's
Yep.
just got this, like, brilliant, again, with AJ, like, having all these colorful sequences, these beach drives, with the 1950s, like, stuff in this. It's like, yeah, beautiful, wholesome, on-the-surface visuals, but underneath this disgusting underbelly that nobody's willing to confront. Like, this morally repugnant, like, lie that is beneath the sort of, like, myth of the American man, mostly, but just America.
Oh, yeah. And also there's something very, like, symbolism-wise about the idea that, like, so much of this neighborhood, the neighborhood was, like I said, just left to rot, and this evil that was sort of always living beneath the surface of this idyllic town was the only thing that remained.
At the end of the day, the facade is always a cover. Like, Frank literalizes the fact that, like, women at the time were property, and, like, only the women that he's either manipulating into, like, getting away, like the woman at the store who's helping him get the baby supplies, or the women he's stalking, those are the only ones that exist in Frank's world in the past.
Yes. Well, and actually, just as we're talking, I'm like, oh, Frank and AJ are just 2 very different kinds of the same thing. They're, Frank manifests in a much more egregious way, but also, again, AJ manifests in a more insidious way. And they both, are misogyny, and they both are men who do a lot of harm without really stopping to think or care about it. And also, talking about there was never a time when everyone was taken care of, it's also just that, like, harsh reminder, nostalgia is a trap, and there was never a time when people weren't hurting each other. There has never been a time when bad things were not happening. Just like there have always been good things that have been happening, but there have also always been bad things, and there have always been bad people. And it's not a recent invention.
And I think what's fascinating about this, too, is that, like, because the movie frames itself around, like, about Tess and her experiences and, like, all the stuff she's trying to do, and Keith, like, we get the sense of, like, people who are genuine and people who are trying surrounded by a world of monsters and cheaters and rat fucks
Yes!
who, like, have forever adapted and hidden in the darkness. Like, you could say, like, that AJ is just as much in the shadows and, like, trying to secretly be a predator as Frank is. What you've got is this idea that evil and predation and, like, malice always needs to hide itself, always needs to bury itself in the ground, while, like, you know, everybody else, it's just always an unwelcome guest, an intruder, even in a place that you thought had no further unwelcome guests, had no further surprises. There's always another level of evil under the bedrock, and that's the point.
I love that. And yeah, I was gonna say the only, like, genuinely good person aside from Tess and Keith that we meet in this movie, aside from the people that we don't really get to spend any time with, but, like, main character is Andre.
Andre is great.
Who is, it's also a great, you know, misdirect because, you know, he seems very, it's a classic horror trope that I always really like, which is, like, scary seeming guy that you're like, oh no, this guy's yelling at me because he's gonna do something. He's like, no, he's trying to save your life.
Yeah, because Andre comes in clutch later in the film to pull Tess out of a really bad situation after, like, the scare from earlier. And he also explains exactly what's going on, like, in the plot of this movie. And you get the sense that, like, this guy is a real American. Like, this guy stuck around, he saw the neighborhood rot, and he has, like, both in terms of, you know, like, the obvious, like, sort of implications of class and race struggle in his character, but the fact that he's literally been in the place where the evil's been festering for so long, and he himself is trying to protect other people from that, even if it means putting himself at risk.
I love him, and God bless this man. He tries so hard to stop Tess from going back down to get Justin Long, but she does not listen to him because she is a nice person.
And what does she get in return? She gets Justin Long shooting her in the stomach.
She gets shot. Yeah. I want to go back first because we skipped over some very important and very disturbing shit.
Yeah, I think we forgot the monster itself.
Well, she's not the monster. Frank is the monster.
No, she's a byproduct of the monster.
I find her deeply tragic, which I love, like, in the vein of, like, a classic, like, kind of morally complex horror movie antagonist. In the vein of a classic, like, Frankenstein's monster almost. Like, she is a victim just as much as she is a perpetrator.
Yeah, she's a tragic creature.
She's so sad. Really I said the last thing was my last Twitter thing, but I need to mention this because you're gonna laugh really hard at this, which is I have a really strong stomach, so I, like, often eat while I watch horror films. I like to eat, and I did eat while I watched this movie, and I had no trouble at all. But I was, like, on Twitter, and I was trying to decide what I wanted to order for, like, takeout or whatever, and I was like, hey Twitter, what should I have for dinner while I watch Barbarian? And every person who replied said milk.
No, no.
Evil.
Oh boy, oh
Evil.
boy.
Justin Long gets knocked out by the mother, the woman in the creature, and he wakes up in a pit, and a baby bottle gets shoved down into the pit, and Tess, because she is smart, is like, drink from the baby bottle or she'll get mad. And he's like, I don't want to drink out of the baby bottle, I don't know what's in that. And she's like, all right, well, she wants you to be her baby. And she drinks the baby bottle, and then the mother is like, good baby, and then goes to Justin Long and is like, bad baby, and takes Justin Long to the breastfeeding room.
It is rather shocking that the threat of being down here in the basement with the mother is the other kind of boobo pit.
No, not the boobo pit. No.
If you want to know about the boo-boo pit, go listen to our distressing 2-sentence horror story video.
No, horrible.
Yeah, no, it's really unfun. There's the breastfeeding room is really bad. There's a lot of ambient visual world building that paints the most horrendous picture of this dungeon, and it's improved by the fact that we never see it in use. So our imagination fills in the most horrific possible thing that could be down here, which is better.
Yes, for a movie that in a lot of ways pulls no punches, like, it is fucking wild how much this movie pulls no punches when it comes to certain things like Bill Skarsgard's death or like the breastfeeding scene, but it also shows a remarkable amount of restraint when it comes to some of its other material. Because I did get a heads up from a couple friends of mine. They were, who know me and want to give me a heads up. They were like, hey, sexual violence does come up as a subject in the movie, but you do not ever see it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. Like, if it's a theme, that's fine. I don't even mind if it's depicted. It just depends on how, and it depends on if I get a warning. But the fact it is, you're so right, it's so much worse that all we get is, like, empty dog crates with bowls in them, and a padded room with a tape about breastfeeding, and a fucking pit, and the sounds of women on a tape screaming. And
yeah, this is what I like to call the anti-Don't Breathe. Because that movie, pulls all of the punches it should have hit and just goes for an entirely different type of horror that people who watched the marketing wasn't there for.
I did not like that film. I don't discredit anyone who does. I get what they were going for. I did not like that film. But I really liked this one, and I really like a movie that knows. I like a movie that both decides to be extremely batshit and balls to the wall, and all swinging titties in your face as she bashes heads into walls, but also completely pulls punches when it knows that nothing will be scarier, when it knows that the implication will be worse.
And also, in regards to, the design and, the appearance of the mother, I do like that we have, a brute monster, a powerful, strong monster that also has just big swinging titties, and it doesn't make her less horrifying.
She's amazing, and I love her, and, she's a fascinating character, and, we're getting into it, but, all she wants is a baby.
It's because all she knows, because, the fucking,
is
motherhood. Evil man.
The evil man, and that's why I say, she is the antagonist, she is not the villain. Do you feel me?
Oh, yeah, because I would say that in terms of who causes the most harm in this, obviously, backstory-wise, it's Frank, but God, does AJ fuck things up over and over again because of decisions he actively makes.
Oh my god. So, first he antagonizes the mother, even though Tess is like, listen, you little bitch. She doesn't call him that, but she should. Play along, or you're gonna get us killed. And he's like, no, I won't drink the milk. And then he goes and then he has to go into the breastfeeding room. And I'm like, well, man, you should have drank the bottle. I'm sorry, not to blame the victim. I normally wouldn't, but you should have drank the bottle. And then
if you're in the Bubo Pit dungeon, then you drink the bottle, or you get the worst drink.
The worst drink from the source. Then he finds, surprise, Frank is alive.
And my God, cause his existence is coupled with a really good line from Andre of she's not even the worst thing down there, referring to the mother.
And I loved that line. That line gave me chills. I love a wham line like that.
Frank in this, one thing that I like that they do with him is that in the present day, where he's just this decrepit old man in his bed, he never says a word. All he can do is gasp out coughs. So you really get the impression of a dragon in his lair surrounded by his horde. And the horde is just a bunch of videotapes that happened in the snuff room of him just bringing women down and impregnating them and having babies with them.
It's so
and then having
bad.
babies
And again,
with the babies.
And again, a bit of restraint that I genuinely fucking appreciate. We never see what's on the tape, and again, I always think that's more effective. We see Justin Long, who is, I keep saying, I need to stop saying this, sounds like I'm slandering Justin Long. We see AJ, who is a piece of shit of the highest order. Watch the tape and be horrified, and that's all I need to know about how fucking bad what's on there is.
Yeah.
I was talking with a friend of mine after she watched Barbarian, and I was like, what'd you think? She was like, I loved it. And she was like, the date rapist yelling at the murder rapist, what's wrong with you, is truly...
Yeah, because that's the thing. AJ is humanized in all the ways that make him more repugnant because you can see the psychology behind it. Frank is dehumanized in a way that makes him more like a horror monster who's like the final boss of the dungeon. And
he's
that
like a
works.
craggly, like, gargoyle man.
Yeah, who speaks in coughs, who, like, you know, has his, like, horrible, like, apocrypha surrounding him. Like, he is truly inhuman in a way that, like, if there wasn't a more human, like, sexual criminal in this, you would be like, oh, well, that's exaggerated. Like, you know, in real life, it's not like that, and this sets a bad precedent. But by doing both, you get to have true abject evil and also but don't let this kind of evil off the hook either.
No, exactly. It's the like horror evil and the like banality of evil kind of coming together, looking at each other in the face, and I really enjoyed that scene a lot. And then of course, fucking AJ gets Frank's gun. Fuck Frank, die. But then AJ,
all my homies hate Frank.
All my homies hate Frank and all my homies hate AJ. Cause Tess, beautiful Tess, sweet angel from above, goes back down because she doesn't know, and if she knew more about AJ, I don't know if she would have been as inclined to let him, just to save him, but maybe she would because she's a good person. But she's like, no, I can't leave him down there. He's down there with her and no one's gonna help. Because, by the way, the police don't fucking help. What a surprise. The police in Detroit especially do not do shit.
No,
I always
not
appreciate
at
a
all.
horror movie that acknowledges that the cops will not save you. And so she's like, well, I have to go help this man. And Andre's like, are you sure? Because as he should be. And she's like, yes, I gotta help this man. And like we just said, what does she get for her trouble? She gets fucking shot by AJ. I was so upset. I thought she was... I was like, if they kill her and he lives, I'm going to scream. But she didn't die.
AJ still thinks he's the main character, even though everything he's done is like hurt her, hinder her, like, you know, cause situations where, like, you know, she's more at harm than him. And like, I think this movie,
he's such a little weasel man.
yeah. And I think the line that like utterly clinches everything that's going on in this film, like regarding him, like where this, like, you know, this whole thing terminates, because at this point, Frank is posthumous. Like we, you know, Tess is bleeding out, and this guy's just like, well, we need to get her help because maybe I'm a bad person, or maybe I'm a good person who did a bad thing. And you're like, oh, you're so close, buddy, because it really doesn't matter whether you're good or bad. What matters is what you're doing now, what your behavior in totality is. And like, he's just so obsessed with the idea of finding some rationalization where he can get back to being good again. And
yes, exactly. He's like, I'm a good guy.
And that's the thing. He doesn't care who he sacrifices so that he'll live another day to potentially one day maybe do a good thing. It doesn't matter if all the things he's doing bad, like, lead up to the point where he's just perpetuating the existence of doing bad things.
Because he's expecting, it's actually, oh no, there's some, like, I don't even know how intentional some of these layers are, but I just got very, like, amped about it, because I'm like, he's expecting Tess to sacrifice her extant life wherein she is being a good, decent, brave person for the possibility of his potential that he might turn it around. And guys
like AJ, they're always on their, like, personal redemption arc, but they never arrive at redemption.
It's that bullshit people say about, like, when, like, women come forward about stuff and they're like, well, what about his future? What about my present, my guy?
Yeah. If, like, him being held accountable isn't a part of building a better future, then, like, sorry, he doesn't deserve a future free of consequences.
Gotta go. Andre, hero, we love him. So sad that fucking, again, AJ endangers him. Because he's like, I've been safe here for years. She's never bothered me. They meet up with him by the water tower. He's like, nothing's ever happened with her. And then, of course, because she's chasing after AJ and Tess, she shows up. Fucking AJ is like, let's escape together, Tess. Let's run up the water tower together, Tess. Let's get away from the fucking... let's get away from the monster, Tess.
When he said, I have a way for me to live, but you've got to slow her down.
I I keep saying I screamed, but I need you to understand I'm not being hyperbolic. I screamed. I was like, you fucker.
Yeah.
You little shit.
And it's like, wow, I imagine the like mental gymnastics in his head. It's like, well, she's injured, so she should sacrifice herself. It's like, why is she injured, AJ? Is it because you were trigger happy down in the dungeon and shot a woman who looks nothing like a 7-foot monster?
Oh my god. Well, first, I already hated him for a lot of reasons, but I hated him a lot when she's like trying to keep up with him. He's running full speed. She's trying to limp along with her like bullet wound. And she's like, can you wait for me? And he's like, no.
And fucking Numbnuts drops his gun too. Like,
yes. She's like, give me the gun, and he drops it. He's just, useless man. And they get to the top of the water tower, yes, and he's like, you gotta slow her down so I can live. And he throws her, knowing that the mother will catch her baby. Because Tess forged a bond with the mother by playing along in the dungeon. So the mother now thinks of her as her child, so she would not deliberately hurt her. And he's right about that, but I'm like, you didn't have to throw her. Oh my god. And then later he tries to walk it back and he's like, you slipped. I tried to help. I barely even touched you. You slipped.
Yeah, because it's never AJ's fault. Everyone out in the world is always out to get him. Like, literally. He is the most persecuted being who's ever lived.
Even when he has that, like, drunken come-to-Jesus moment where he leaves them that voicemail on that poor woman's phone, he never says, I'm sorry I hurt you. He says, I'm sorry if I hurt you. I'm sorry, like, something happened. Like, no responsibility. There's no such thing as responsibility for this man.
No, he just wants, like, the consequence-free world of being a fucking celebrity, like, rich landlord man.
He wants to be forgiven, but he doesn't want to earn forgiveness, and he doesn't want to accept that he has anything that he needs to be forgiven for. And it's so frustrating. And so, God, is it wonderful when the mother lifts him up by his fucking scrawny little neck and just like pops his head like a grape.
Yeah, exactly. Because like even she's like, sorry, everyone's my baby, but I'm done with you. Goodbye.
That was one of those where I was like, they pulled no punches with his death. It was so gnarly. She pops his fucking eyes and just like splits his head open.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I was clapping like with just like bloodthirsty glee. I need to be honest with you guys. I was very happy to see it.
Yeah, no, I was like, the thing about this though is that like even though AJ dies and Frank is dead, this final moment in this film between Tess and like the mother is
I cried.
Yeah, because it's just like it's just kind of like, well, there was like this was just the worst couple weeks of Tess's life. Like because everybody fucked it up. Like, everybody fucked it up. And all she did was try to make sure everyone was safe.
Yes. And also it's that moment, too, of, like, you know, obviously there is no, like, world where the mother will ever be okay. There is no, like, future for her. There is no way this could end that isn't sad, that isn't tragic. But, God, it is absolutely devastating to see her, like, look this person in the eye that she has like forged this bond with and like have a moment of understanding that the baby is going to kill her.
Yeah.
And it really hurt my feelings a lot.
Well, that's
also brilliant performance from the actress playing Tess, the way that she plays that moment, because it's not triumphant. Like it's not like a final girl, like it's not like Sydney shooting Ghostface in the head moment. It's like, I have no other option, but this isn't good.
Every decision that Tess makes throughout this movie is, like, she makes a lot of decisions for self-preservation, but she also is clearly, like, willing to, open herself up to people, no matter how frightening they may at first seem.
She's led by kindness, and she's led by, like, care and like dedication to like her fellow human being.
We get how she developed this bond with the mother because we saw her like seeing Keith as kind of this scary intruder, this like, person who she's cohabitating with, we saw her like, eventually open up to him and bond with him. And the mother is a step up and much scarier.
Yes. And the fact that she's capable of the empathy that it takes, like when she says to AJ, she's like, she just wants you to be her baby. That's what she wants from you.
Whereas AJ is a coward. And part of his cowardice,
also incapable of empathy.
Yeah, well, because he thinks he's this like misunderstood like person who everyone sees as some kind of horrible monster, but all he wants to do is get close to somebody, and
like,
that's the same thing with the mother.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm just a mommy, and I want to just take care of. I'm gonna stop saying this because it feels really weird in my voice.
I'm just a mommy.
I'm just a mommy.
Someone's gonna clip.
Yeah. Oh no! Please don't clip it. Leave a comment if you're gonna clip it.
Leave a comment if you think that Gus is mom.
Gus's best mom. Holy shit.
If you made it this far into the video, right? Gus is best mom.
Well,
right, Gus is my mommy. Okay,
Gus is my mom. Jesus fucking Christ.
Sorry, that was really evil. That was a real AJ move on my part. No, I really though, the more I talk about Tess, the more affection I feel for her character.
She reminds me a lot of there was another protagonist in a film I saw recently that might be covered on the Patreon. The film Overlord.
I have not seen Overlord.
It's a wartime movie, but the protagonist of that is also somebody who always makes the empathetic choice, and we get to see like where that pays off and where that doesn't pay off. And it's a combination similar to Tess, where it's like, yeah, going down into that basement because you felt empathy for Keith, that leaves you subject to the whims of the mother. Also, having empathy for the mother, sure, you survive, but you also remain her prisoner. Like, so it's like the limitations of empathy are expressed, but also you get a contrast with a character like AJ who always makes unempathetic choices, and sometimes they work out selfishly for him, and other times they don't.
Also, we haven't talked about this, but there's a line early in the movie that I think is really reflective of like most of the rest of like that really like I think establishes a lot of the themes of the film really well, which I always get excited about. I always geek out a bit about as a writer, and that's when she's talking to Keith. Tessa's talking to Keith about her ex, and she's like talking about I'm paraphrasing because I've only seen the movie once, but like relationships where like someone's trying to control you and call it love.
Yeah, and that's the relationship she has with the mother.
It's the mother, and it's also what Frank hurt and controlled and manipulated people, and I'm sure was able to justify it to himself. And it's a lot of that kind of like the justifications of hurt and not knowing.
And that's the thing. Like Tess, her like last line to the mother is, "I'm sorry, I can't go back," which echoes that conversation she had with Keith. Because she did keep ending up in these situations where, like, going back for AJ is one of those things. Like, being so willing to go along with the mother's plan is one of those things. Hell, even in a bizarre, weird way, the fact that, like, she let Keith in after, like, a day of just knowing him shows that, like, there's a double-edged sword to this, but ultimately, the ability to trust matters.
It's a combination of it's one of her biggest strengths is that she knows how to trust people and is empathetic and is compassionate to them. But you're right, that final line of "I'm sorry, I can't go back." The first time we see her actually in the entire film put herself first, because when you're somebody who is inherently selfless like that, you do have to draw the line somewhere, or it will literally kill you.
And I think that's maybe where the title comes from, this idea of the barbarian, because a barbarian is, someone who's from a different place, who speaks an unintelligible language, who like is entirely different from the people surrounding them, and they're defined by that difference. And I think in some ways this movie shows that, like, well, Tess, appears in front of Keith, and to each other they're barbarians, and then in the basement, well, there's monsters down there. That's the barbarian. But Frank is also the barbarian because he created this barbaric place down there. And AJ, a barbarian too. And it just, every stranger you meet regardless of where they stand on how strange and how different they are, including Andre, who like is mistrusted by Tess at the beginning. Every other person in this entire world is a barbarian until you understand the language of like their soul, of their being, who they truly are at their core. And trust is the tool that you use to push towards that. And it doesn't always end well, but it's the bare minimum that's necessary in a world filled with barbarism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, did that make any sense? I feel like
No,
I just
I liked
went
it a
off
lot.
like yeah.
I enjoy having I always enjoy having a chat about a movie with a friend that I can just sort of dig into and be like, discover things about it that I didn't think about while watching it, because while watching it I was mainly like, the breastfeeding, fucking why won't AJ die?
Well, that's the thing. I feel like this is clearly a film that like it has all of that stuff, but none of it's in there by accident. Like it's so scary, so spooky. It has wonderful set pieces, great characters, and they all like work together really well to just create a wealth of interpretations.
Yeah, hell yeah. Barbarian is an absolutely batshit movie, and I think that one of the things about it that I really like, aside from all the things we've just talked about for an hour, is the fact that I think we're seeing a nice push after a couple years of very, very safe mainstream artistic releases and like dependence on big franchise stuff. I think we're seeing more and more really big, weird swings again, as is kind of the natural pendulum swinging back the other way. The pendulum of like culture. And so I just hope the more of this we get, the more of this we get, because Barbarian did well at the box office. It made back way more than its budget. It did really well. So I hope it makes more filmmakers be like, all right, I'm gonna do like something fucking weird.
Yeah, exactly. And like, because the director of this, I'm blanking on his name, but he was one of the founding members of The Whitest Kids You Know.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah, no, legit. Yeah, that's who the director of this movie is.
I didn't know that.
So like between this and the success of Jordan Peele, I'm like, okay, more weird sketch comedians getting into horror, because clearly
weird comedy people make some of my favorite horror. I love it.
Yeah.
I want more movies that make big swings, even when I don't enjoy a movie that makes a big swing. Like I've seen some, and I won't name them because I don't like talking about art that I don't like nearly as much. But like I've seen stuff that I've been like, I didn't like this, but like I appreciate that it was doing something fucking weird and interesting.
Between Barbarian's structure, the like utter oddness and like uncomfortable reality of a character like AJ, and just the like the way that it took like a it's monster in all the like hokey cheesy ways that a like horrifying mutant monster in the basement should be, but also grounded it in some kind of story about like American culture and lies buried beneath like
they gave
it's
yeah.
The text,
much like the house on Barbary Street, this film has some hidden depths.
When the text is rich. Me when the text is rich.
Sorry, evil. We got my witch cackle out.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, so go see Barbarian. If
fun.
you've already seen it, go see it again. There's layers to this movie.
If you don't want to go to the theater, it's on HBO Max. Best enjoyed with a tall glass of milk.
Stop it. No.